Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this slightly late starting meeting of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, held on Monday, January 27th, 2020. I'm Mayor Todd Kasenberg, and it's my pleasure to call this meeting to order. I ask the Deputy Clerk to note our starting time for the minutes as 7:24 p.m. That's what it looks like from here. I'll invite all to rise for the playing of O Canada. Today's meeting is being streamed live on the Municipality of North Perth YouTube channel and will be available there after the meeting as an archived video. To those present in the gallery today, by attending a public meeting of council, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded. Anyone who is invited to speak will be recorded, and their voice, image, and comments will form part of the live stream. The chair and/or the clerk have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming. Such direction will only be given in exceptional circumstances where deemed relevant. Circumstances may include instances where the content of debate is considered misleading, defamatory, or potentially inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in inappropriate and/or unacceptable behavior and/or comments. Thank you. Now, this community succeeds and flourishes when its people make their contributions. Those making important contributions include councillors at this table who will listen to and deliberate on the matters on our proposed agenda. This council has been well supported by dedicated members of the staff of North Perth who provide service and reports to this council and to our community and those who have business with or interest in the work of this council. I appreciate all of you being here and your service. I invite your decorum over the course of the coming meeting. Since our work requires concentration, procedures issued by council require all but councillors and specific media to turn off electronic communication devices at this time, and even then to respect focused use for our meeting. Use of cameras or audio devices during or to record this meeting is not permitted. Let us move on then to item 2.1 on our agenda pertaining to pecuniary interest. For the benefit of those unfamiliar with our council practices, provincial legislation requires councillors with a potential pecuniary or financial interest in any item at the council table to declare this interest and to remove her or himself from discussions and voting on the item. In accordance with recommended protocol at this time, I invite all councillors with pecuniary interest, including those who have declared already in writing, to verbally advise the chair in public session and to submit documentation to this effect in writing to the clerk. Councillors are further reminded that should a potential conflict arise during the meeting, they may so declare and act at any point. And I will take those who wish to so declare. Councillor Behrens?
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. I would declare a conflict on 5.4.1, the accounts. Included in the accounts is the North Perth Spinrite Child and Family Centre, and I have grandchildren that attend the daycare.
Thank you, Councillor Behrens. Deputy Mayor Kellum?
Yes, sir, Mayor Kasenberg. I would also like to declare pecuniary interest on item 5.4.1 with regards to the accounts referring to Perth Metals, as my mother and father-in-law are tenants at Perth Metals, as well as 13.1, the confirmatory buy.
Thank you. Anyone further at this point? I too will declare I have an interest which will absent me from discussion of item 7.1 and the confirmatory bylaw. 7.1 because I serve as a director of the Atwood Lions Club. All right, regarding item 2.2 of our agenda, I have a motion before me. Let me open the book. For the approval of tonight's agenda that reads as follows, that the agenda for tonight's meeting be approved. The clerk is waving her hand. Let's invite you, and you are microphone number 16.
So tonight under the council agenda, on your closed session portion of the meeting, agenda number 11, we'd like to add receiving advice that's subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, regarding Line 81 Bridge project.
And is that referenced in the motion?
That is.
We get to that point. Thank you, Pat. That's appreciated. Okay, so let's revise then our resolution to read as follows, that the agenda for tonight's meeting as amended be approved. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Seiler, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Johnston. Any discussion on this matter? I better get my computer system open here. And it's not opening. You might have to wait for me. My apologies, Council. Yeah. Now I'm in. And Councillor Behrens has said she is voting. There we go. So that is carried. Thank you. We've got that sorted out. All right. Let's move on next to item 3 on our agenda, the so-called consent agenda. These items are placed on our agenda because they are believed to be non-contentious, yet they require council's approval. Grouping them expedites our business. However, any councillor wishing to extract an item from the consent agenda for discussion, debate, and individual action may do so. There are 12 items on our consent agenda tonight, including the minutes of the last regular council meeting. Councillors, do you have any desire to extract any of these items for discussion or action? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much. Item 3.8, I'd just like to talk specifically about the extended producer responsibility, and there's a requirement for the municipality to have discussion regarding when we would like to see us be able to move out of the current system through blue water recycling. And this is, I believe, we're going to probably see a report through staff, but I just want to make sure that we have that conversation here related to item 3.8.
Okay. Did you believe that we should do that immediately after the consent agenda item, or is this something where you intend to request a report from staff and we can take this up at a future council meeting?
It would be the latter. So I suspect that we're going to see a report from staff on that matter.
Okay. So when we get to item 6 on our agenda, if you'd bring that back to our awareness. I actually had some items. Anyone else have items? I was looking at, let's see if I can figure it out here. It was there was a request from the Lake Erie source protection, which implied 3.6, item 3.6, which implied a request for some consideration by councils regarding their recommendations. I may do exactly what I've suggested with respect to Councillor Rothwell. We may just ask for a quick report on this from staff. Further, I took note that under Blue Water Recycling, I think there was a second matter, which was opportunity to direct a resolution to the province concerning the slow down, move over provisions and changes to the Highway Traffic Act. So I don't know whether we want to pick that up in the same fashion and ask for a report next time, but it seems like that might be a reasonable approach. So we've got a few things in this agenda that might be of interest for reports. Councillor Andreessen.
I was also wondering about 3.11 regarding Calvary Zion United Church. The request was around the planting of trees, and I know that our recreation department has been doing a lot of that already, and I didn't know if perhaps some kind of communication through recreation to share what's already being done,
Right.
if that's sufficient, or any thoughts around that?
So maybe we should add that to the same request. So staff should brace themselves. We have a few requests to make pertaining to some parts of the consent agenda later on in the meeting. But yes, I thank you. Any other comments about the consent agenda for specific action at this point? Okay, so why don't we pick up the resolution that has been prepared for our consideration, that consent items 3.1 to 3.12 be received for information, and the minutes of the January 13th, 2020 regular council meeting be adopted. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Anstead, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing no indication of same, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. So that moves us to agenda item 4. We have one delegation tonight. It is my pleasure to invite Robert Maxwell from TGT Solutions to the podium. TGT is a contractor to the municipality on the development of an IT plan. And Mr. Maxwell is here to provide us with an overview of their report on the 5-year IT strategic plan for North Perth. Welcome, Mr. Maxwell.
I'd like to open by thanking the staff at North Perth, the management and the councillors. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Wanted to start by saying thank you to the team, the management and the councillors for allowing us to have done this plan and for allowing me to stand before you to speak to the plan. With your permission, I'd like to probably take about 6 or 7 minutes just to run through what we consider to be the highlights of the plan. First and foremost, on page 4, let's try this out. I'm a technology guy, you'd think I'd make this work. I think I get the hang of it. I'd like to draw your attention to page 4 in the overview, where we make reference to North Perth's vision. You want to be a regional centre that enjoys strong working relationships, and you outline the parameters within which you want to do so. We've suggested a technology vision which dovetails into that larger vision in support of it. We've suggested a vision of focusing great service experiences powered by technology and data anytime, anywhere. We think having a vision that supports your vision is very important. A technology set that's directed and focused in that area, we believe, will create greater value. Second of all, we make a number of suggestions with respect to strategy. We speak about strategy in several different ways. We talk about modernizing your equipment. We talk about digitizing your data. and we talk about delivering those services in a very fast and efficient way. We speak about strategy from the perspective of using some of the time last year and some of the time this year for planning. We then speak about formation of phases, and then we speak about continuity at the end of that strategy. So we've looked at strategy in several different ways in an effort to help this become a very digestible type of plan. Another thing that we do in the document is we make reference to the word client. And client for us refers to the internal client, members of staff using the systems, and external clients, whether they be citizens or organizations. It's important in our view to create a holistic view of clients so that whoever makes a request of the region, of the municipality, can do so and access the same data, so you don't have to have different repositories. So you have one repository, but then depending on the permission which that client has, an internal client, for example, would have permission to see everything. A citizen may have permission in certain areas. Organizations may have other types of permissions. But by having and housing the data once, you can conserve on cost, and you can deliver the kind of fast service that I'm sure all of you have become used to when interacting with websites like Amazon, Canadian Tire, Chapters, and all the rest of it. So we've spoken about vision, we've spoken about strategy, we've spoken about the concept of client. On page, I believe that's page 5. Let's see if I can get to it. That's way too fast, too far. Sorry. Right, on page 5, we make reference to a series of guiding principles. We believe the guiding principles are extremely important because no matter what you choose, if you adhere to these principles, we believe you will save yourselves considerable money and make considerable progress. So we've listed about 9 principles here, and we invite the council and the municipalities team to make reference to those guiding principles at some point. We also make reference to a governance model. Very briefly, a governance model is a structure that everyone understands. We believe it starts with council. We believe it moves into a subset of council members who, very much like an audit committee on a board would do, take a higher level of responsibility for technology. We believe it involves the management team, and it then involves what we will call working committees who take a significantly higher proportion of ownership for that project. So it's a very tiered structure, and if managed correctly, the governance model can deliver significant value to the organization. Number 6, we've made reference to performance metrics. How do you know that you've succeeded? So we've made some reference to short-term performance metrics and to long-term performance metrics. We respect that you're not bound to use the metrics we've created, but just establishing a principle called metrics, just establishing what performance actually means. Is it a return on investment financially? Is it the number of users who come in from the outside to use your systems? Is it the speed with which internal staff members can use a system or access data? We're very strongly advocating for a set of metrics which can be used consistently year over year and which will help everyone to realize the kind of incremental performance you're making. We've suggested that just under $1.5 million is required to make these changes. It may be a large number, but we believe that chosen correctly and invested wisely over the 5-year period, this municipality will be very happy it did so for the next 20 years. And last but not least, we advocate shared services. To the extent possible, work with your upper tier to see what they're doing, cooperate and collaborate so that you can both enter into a project together and presumably share cost, derive value. Those are the highlights we'd like to present in respect of the report.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Councillors, questions at this time pertaining to the report that's been made available or Mr. Maxwell's presentation? Councillor Andreessen.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Kaysenberg. I really appreciate the work that's been done with TGT in terms of really identifying what our needs are. I recognize that was well done in terms of looking at our dependence on manual tech or manual tasks and needing to have these guiding principles. I think that was well done. I also appreciate the consideration around the governance model that's been suggested. What I am a little disappointed about is just the lack of, I would say, solutions to what has been identified, and what some recommendations would be specifically for those solutions that we need. And I recognize that some of those solutions are indicated in our charts, but not to the detail that I'd like to see. And I think that's what we need. It's really great to have a governance committee and I model, and I appreciate that. But without good knowledge and information behind that, we could continue to go in circles and spend 1.5 million on what? So that's my concern is, where's the level of detail about how we can move forward with solutions? And specifically in many of the areas in those charts, I have grave concerns about. The other thing that I'd like to know about more is that there was a chart in the report about current technology, and I think it was outdated technology. I forget the terminology that was used. And I guess I'm interested in finding out what is typical in an organization. So how much equipment in an organization should be considered, I guess, current and up to date, and what should the replacement policy be around, because we can't have everything current. And where we are at the current time, are we different than most organizations, or are we worse off, or are we better off? I wasn't really clear on how we were shown in those charts. So there's a couple of concerns that I have in taking a look at what's been offered.
I would like to parse your comments into three parts. First of all, with respect to the roadmap, we've made a number of suggestions with respect to future projects, and we've broken them by year. We do not know what you will choose to spend or when you will choose to spend it, so we can't go into deeper detail about these projects, because that would involve going out and getting costs, getting estimates, and all the rest of it. So we've suggested at a high level a roadmap, and there is at least 20 projects listed across the, I can't see from here, but at the back of the report, it was broken by year, and there's a recommendation on the amount which should be considered and the type of project by department that should be considered. That's as far as we can go without a mandate to delve deeper, call vendors and ask for specific prices. With respect to the current situation, we went through and we interviewed, I think we interviewed all the departments. I could be wrong in saying all, but we interviewed several of the departments. And we went through and we looked at the systems which those departments are using. We heard the feedback, and we can make more of the comments of those departments and our findings available if that helps. So we spoke about the department, we spoke about whether they were using a cloud or hosted system, whether they were using an in-house system, we spoke about their assets, their points of concern, and ways to address those concerns. Again, without having a mandate to say this department is a higher priority or this amount of spend is available, it's hard to delve more deeply. We welcome the opportunity to help you, but in the time that was available and with the mandate we had, we thought that this was as far as we could go. The third part of what you asked, how typical are you when compared to other municipalities in terms of the age or the currency of your assets? I believe we have a chart here which indicates that about 55% of your hardware is current. That's considerably better than it would have been 12 months ago. I believe you've gone through a refresh program, so you are moving toward currency. The key thing about currency is the speed with which you can respond to the requests being made. So at the moment, just to give you an example, you have no parks and recs system whereby a member of the public can go request space online and book it without having to interact with staff and for staff having to do a lot of things. In order to do that, we then need new software. In order for that software to work, we then need new equipment. So the need drives the equipment, and then we compare that equipment to the equipment you already have in order to give you a sense of it. I can say to you that based on our other work, this is a very typical pattern where you've gone through some sort of refresh, and we're now advocating a way to do a refresh in future. We've advocated a cloud-first technology, a cloud-first approach. So while 44% of your equipment is now mature, when we move to a cloud-first approach, most of it's going to be in the cloud and be very current. So we think that if you adopt some of the strategies we've talked about, you will probably end up with 10% in the mature range, because there are some desktops or laptops that, even though they're past their 3-year life cycle, are still valuable to you. There's no business need to replace them. But a server that's client-facing and it's in the cloud would automatically be refreshed for you.
Further questions, councillors? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Maxwell, thanks very much for your report. I just have a couple questions, and I presume there's a couple typos there, and I'm sure staff will deal with that. Steve Kerr, for example, Kerr, and council. But anyways, I'm sure you'll get to those. My question is, on page 30, we talk about implementation of the Perth County Shared GIS strategy, which I'm familiar with. Now, what I'm concerned about is the proposed budgeting for in-house GIS, and starting in year 2021, I think it is, we're looking at between 2021 and 2024, we're looking at spending some $70,000 to have our own in-house GIS. And I raised this with council before. The concern that's here is that, and your comments regarding sharing resources and so on, this is key to us making sure that we're actually getting the most bang for the buck. And I'm just concerned where on one hand we're saying that we should share the resource, and then in the GIS sphere in particular, we're suggesting, I think on page 35 and 44, where we're talking about the implementation of in-house GIS for North Perth. So that's my one concern that I have on that, and perhaps Mr. Maxwell can answer that.
Sure, thank you. GIS is going to become increasingly important with modern apps. It's already important, and it will become increasingly important. Sharing that cost with the upper tier would be the ideal solution, but we believe there is a cost-benefit analysis that can be performed which can demonstrate the types of uses which people can have for the GIS, which would make it worthwhile. So if we consider the earlier comments about more detail being required, I believe that if the governance model is used, a committee is struck to investigate the GIS, a cost-benefit analysis would be prepared before you spend that type of money. So we've recommended a 70,000 spend. Council may say, right, we'll allocate 7,000, 10% is what we would advocate, towards the study of the benefit of that for this municipality. The staff would then be empowered to look at some of the current apps which are using it in other cities, the benefit which they're deriving, and bring back a report to you. So before you go spend beyond the 7,000, you would have a quantified report on your desk which says, here's what others are doing with it, here's how it can add value. You perhaps may even have had the opportunity to ask the upper tier, would you split this with us because this is something we can be doing region-wide? And you may even have the ability to partner with someone who has an interest in this geography, for example, an agricultural firm, who may offset some of that cost for you. So we recommend projects, which we pointed out, you don't have to take our recommendation because you know more than we do. But we're saying that based on what we've seen elsewhere, GIS is a very big deal. When you think about RFID and tracking food from its very source of creation and its movement, when you think about your young people who are growing up in this municipality, GIS, we think, is a very significant play.
Thank you. I certainly agree with those comments. I appreciate that. My last question, if I may, Mr. Mayor, deals specifically with, it's the table, and it's on page 42 of the report. I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about housing software and the implementation of software for managing a social housing facility. This comes as something new to me, and I'm not sure if the rest of council is aware of that. Pardon me, but the top of page 42, housing software, and we're looking at spending some 21,000 in 2023-24.
With pleasure. Wonderful. So there are a group of people who don't have a lot of money, who may need a particular type of housing. You may institute a policy which says you can have the use of this housing for up to 2 years. We may advocate a type of policy which says we're going to focus on a particular group in your community who needs this more than another group. There are all kinds of metrics that you can capture which will show the benefit of this type of housing and how you, at a policy level, are seeing your policies being implemented and the value being created. That was the big thought there.
Okay. Well, I look forward, I'm sure council does as well, in terms of seeing that in the years to come, but thank you very much.
Other questions at this point, council? Mr. Maxwell, I'll draw your attention to one thing, which is the title of the report. The title of the report reads Strategic Plan and because it's written in such a generic way, it could reference the entire municipality, which is not the case. This is a strategic plan for IT, or an IT strategic plan, or something like that. We would hate for our residents, our ratepayers, to misunderstand and think that we're solely in the business of IT, when in fact we've just gone through a very significant corporate strategic plan exercise. So I'll ask you to consider making a small revision in that title.
Yes.
Moving forward.
We're happy to make all of the revisions as we've met with staff on a number of occasions. We've had some input, and we're meeting with others, and we are very, very happy to continue to update the document.
Great, thank you. Council, I have a resolution for consideration that will deal with our receipt of this report tonight. Reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the report presented by TGT Solutions Inc. dated January 17th, 2020, and further that North Perth Council repeals Resolution 499.09/19, adopted on September 23rd, 2019. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Rothwell, thank you, and Councillor Seiler is our seconder. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. Thank you for coming.
Am I
and
allowed to
visiting
make
with us
one
tonight.
closing comment?
Oh, please.
Yeah. We very much want to see you succeed. We very much want to help you. So we're looking forward to being a real assistance, not just writing the report, but answering questions and finding relevant ways to make this valuable to you. We want this to work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And of course, Council, I will draw your attention to the fact that there is some significant work that lies ahead, especially with regards to initiating governance models. I believe that in the near future, a report will be brought to Council pertaining to establishing appropriate governance structures. That brings us to agenda item 5.1. Item 5.1.1 is an annual statistical report to this council that must be filed with the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario. Mr. Snell, I assume you have a few comments.
Basically, I can deal with actually 5.1 and 5.12, the same discussion. Really, as required by the province, we do file our Freedom of Information request information, both for the municipality and for the Police Services Board. And really, as a result of, council can read in the reports, it's a very uneventful year for requests, and certainly have no issues procedurally. And if anybody has any questions, I can answer them either on the municipal report or the Police Services Board report.
Thanks, Chris. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Snell about either of these reports? As Mr. Snell has mentioned, it's pretty quiet. It's been a pretty quiet period. Okay, I have two resolutions. I guess we'll take both of these in order. We'll do 5.1.1 and 5.1.2 quickly here. For our consideration, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the 2019 IPC year-end statistical report for the Municipality of North Perth. Can I invite a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Kellum and Councillor Andreessen, thank you. Any discussion or debate on this one? Seeing none, let's have the vote. And that's carried. Let me turn to the second one. This pertains to the Police Services Board, that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the 2019 IPC year-end statistical report for the North Perth Police Services Board. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Behrens, thank you, and Councillor Rothwell. Any discussion or debate on that one? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Thank you. Next up then is item 5.1.3. It invites Council to consider a bylaw formalizing an agreement with Ontario's Minister of Government and Consumer Services relating to the lease of space to probation and parole services in our building, this building. Mr. Snell.
So as you can see from the report, for many years, the province has rented space in our office for adult probation and parole. They rent a small, very small space from us next to the OPP. The OPP believe it's an added benefit to the services they provide, and the probation and parole seem to enjoy the relationship. Again, looking at another 5-year lease commencing next year, and we did increase the rent by an inflationary rate from the last renewal. But in many ways, it's a very low cost space for us, just because the space is also shared and is very small office.
Thank you, councillors. Any questions on this matter? Okay. Seeing none. To find the right action here, I have for our consideration the bylaw, Council. That bylaw number 14-2020 being a bylaw to authorize the signing of a lease and extension agreement with Her Majesty the Queen in right of Ontario, as represented by the Minister of Government and Consumer Services, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the Mayor and the Clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Anstead, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Seiler. Any discussion or debate on that matter? Seeing none, let's have the vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And item 5.1.4 invites Council to consider taking the lead in a collaborative funding application to the Ontario Trillium Foundation for the purposes of securing grant funding for a feasibility study for a proposed Huron-Perth Children's Museum. I'll invite CAO Snell to provide an overview.
So this adventure has created some excitement among staff and members of the Economic Development Committee. Jill Lewis, who is with us tonight, first met with the mayor and I some time ago, and we've had some meeting with some additional staff as well as the Economic Development Committee to look at the possibility of supporting Jill and her volunteer board in seeking a feasibility study for a potential children's museum to be located in North Perth. As you can see from the report, Jill has done a tremendous amount of, and her board have done a tremendous amount of work on looking at the opportunities a children's museum could provide our community, as well as some of the economic spin-off benefits as well. The target would be an elementary-aged children's museum. And really the first step in going forward would be the conduct of a feasibility study, which has been estimated to cost $30,000. Because the board is not yet a charitable organization, they do not qualify to apply to the Ontario Children Foundation, and therefore that is the request before us, is that the municipality would act as the collaborative partner, and at that point we would be responsible to ensure that the grants are spent the way that they are to be spent as per the application. Jill and her board have offered to help the staff writing the grant, and at that point I think it would just be up for us to sort of be the accountant and auditor of the grant monies if successful through the Children Foundation. Certainly Jill can answer any questions that the council may have regarding the actual museum itself, and I can answer any questions regarding our partnership as a collaborative of applier to the Ontario Children Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Snell. Questions or comments from council at this point? Councillor Rothwell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through to either Chris or Jill. I mean, this is a very exciting proposal. I'm just wondering if there's been any discussions with either the school boards and or the Stratford Perth Museum or the Huron County Museum, just given that's their mandate in terms of that age group and museums. I'm just wondering if there's been more conversations with Jill and her group through those organizations.
Chair recognizes Jill Lewis.
Thank you for having me tonight. We haven't approached the school boards, but we have approached the North Perth schools. So far, we've received letters of support from Listowel District Secondary School. They're looking at it from a side of volunteer opportunities, co-op opportunities, employment, that kind of thing for high school age students. We've approached Elma, Eastdale, Westfield, St. Mary's. All principals are in support, and we're waiting on letters of support from them. Haven't yet branched out past North Perth at this point. This is sort of the early stages, and then we'll branch out past that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments of either Mr. Snell or Ms. Lewis? Okay. I have a resolution for our consideration that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves entering into a collaborative agreement with the Huron-Perth Children's Museum, and further that North Perth submit a collaborative funding application to the Ontario Trillium Foundation to fund a feasibility study for a children's museum in North Perth. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Johnston, seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Thank you. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing no hands up, let's have that vote. Leanne, are you? There we go. And that is carried. Thank you. That is exciting news. Some of us are smiling from ear to ear at this point. Thank you. Next up is item 5.2, and we'll smile from ear to ear for Ed Podnowitz as well. I'm going to invite Ed, who is the North Perth Chief Building Official, to present the 2019 Building Department A Year in Review report. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor Kassenberg, council members, staff, and public. So I prepared a brief PowerPoint summary to inform council on municipalities' building department 2019 year in review. So this slide here, it just basically shows a summary of building permits, building permit issuance in 2019. And this slide this reflects a 10-year summary of building activity. You will note that the issuance of building permits has steadily increased over this 10-year period, with a 2019 year-end total of 453 issued permits. And as you can see in the summary, new dwelling units started to spike in about 2016, with a total of 144 dwelling units created, and has steadily increased to reflect a new record of 342 dwelling units created in 2019. A very substantial increase. This slide chart shows number of dwelling units created in the listable ward over a 10-year period. And I've included on the left side of the page a graph showing dwelling units by type, including single, semi, and multiple dwellings created over the past 5-year period. The chart on the left on this slide reflects the number of dwelling units created in the Wallace ward over a span of 10 years. The graph on the right reflects dwelling units by type over the past 5-year period. Although the predominant residential development in this ward is typically single-family dwellings, the graph shows a multi-unit dwelling has been created in 2017, and this is attributed to the redevelopment of the former Wallace Municipal Office into 3 apartment units. This slide shows created dwelling units in the Elmo ward over a 10-year period, and a graph showing dwelling unit activity over the past 5 years. In 2019, you will note some semi-detached and multi-dwelling types created, specifically in the Lone Oak subdivision in Atwood. And Alan Rothwell, Councillor Rothwell brought to my attention earlier that we didn't include the multi-units in the Sugarbush development. They were actually put in the listable ward. So there was probably 6 4-unit townhouses in 2019 that could be added to the Elmo ward. And this graph shows total number of permits issued in the past 5 years, in the past 5-year period. The graph lines are very consistent in building permit activity per month and shows a gradual increase in issued permits over a 5-year period. And this reflects a pattern of building permits issued per month over a 5-year scale. I thought this graph interesting as it reflects residential demolition activity since 2010. The number of residential demolition dropped significantly in 2018 and 2019, which could possibly be attributed to the number of surplus farm servants permitted in that time period. That's just my opinion. And this slide here, in 2007, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs struck a technical advisory committee on farm fires to address the fire safety risks. The purpose of the committee was to reduce the potential for life and property loss by identifying the regulatory requirements and best management practices in the industry. Members of the committee included building officials, which I was selected and honored to be included, Canadian Farm Builders members, Electrical Safety Authority, farm building contractors and design engineers, insurance industry, Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, OMAFRA, Ontario Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Ontario Office of the Fire Marshal, and Ontario Pork. Publication 837 was developed as a result of this committee. Recently, OMAFRA has revisited this publication and has struck a new committee to review and revise the current publication. I was invited to be part of this new committee, and again, I'm honored to be able to provide input from a building department standpoint. And this slide is, I'm pleased to inform Council that the development of a new farm building code is finally in the consulting stage. I've been invited to sit on the consultation task group through the Canadian Farm Builders Association, and it is anticipated that a new farm building code will be adopted in the near future and included in the National Building Code of Canada. This 25-year-old code is well overdue, as farm buildings have drastically changed over the years. And I believe this information was recently brought forward at a recent council meeting, but I've included a chart created by U-Haul indicating the top 25 Canadian growth cities of 2019 from data compiled from more than 2 million one-way truck sharing transactions. This data reflects North Perth as number 16 on the list out of 25. And North Perth was also recognized in U-Haul's 2018 growth chart in the number 18 position. So we have climbed 2 positions. And this slide is just some additional information I'd like to share with Council. It's with dealing with matters the building department is currently involved with. So just recently, in January 1st, 2020, there were approximately 1,200 amendments to the Ontario Building Code. The building department will be performing its mandatory 5-year reinspection on 35 septic systems, which are located within 100 meters of municipal wells. And consultation has started on amendments to the National Building Code of Canada. It is anticipated that all provinces in Canada will administer building codes through a new national code, and a new provincial code will be established specific to each province. And in the fall of 2019, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing announced that they were proposing a new service delivery branch called Transforming and Modernizing the Delivery of Ontario's Building Code Services, with the intent of improving delivery of key services to municipal building departments. The cost of delivering this service would be subsidized from a percentage of the cost of construction calculated values from each municipality city in Ontario. There was a distinct negative impact from all stakeholders during this consultation period of this proposal, and I'm pleased to announce that no further movement has been proceeded in this regard to date. So we'll just keep our ears open, and I'll keep council informed of that. And I thank you for your time and patience, and would be pleased to answer any questions.
Councillors, questions for Mr. Podnowitz on his report or about the building operations? Councillor Johnston.
Ed, thank you for your report. I'm referring to the summary of permits issued from 2009 to 2019. And in the last 4 years, we have created over 900 dwellings. I find that stat unbelievable. Do we have sufficient lots to sustain that for the next few years? And then my next question is from 2009 to 2019, have you noticed that we have increased our density in urban areas for some of the residential development? Thank you.
Okay. So the first question in regards to inventory, I'm led to believe I was a little concerned that we were going to be shy on inventory. There's a new subdivision that should be going gangbusters in the spring here, and that's the Maitland Estates, I believe, by Mr. Dunnigan. I've been informed that 75% of those lots are sold already. And we have actually issued 1 permit in there for a model home so far, and I have 2 more sitting on my desk right now. So it's going to fill up fast, I'm sure, this year. In regards to density, we have noticed quite an impact with density in the past couple of years. I think even council is encouraging developers to create more density in subdivisions. We're growing at a fast pace, and we may run out of land if we keep going at that pace if we don't take into consideration some density targets.
Mr. Snell?
Just so council's aware, the county of Perth has basically asked Watson and Associates of the official plan process to take another look at North Perth and the growth projections provided in the initial allotment of 20-year growth in the first official plan draft. That I was speaking with Sally today from the county. We expect to see those numbers in the next number of weeks, and I think it is imperative that we take a look at what our growth will look like for the next 20 to 25 years through the official plan process. And I certainly agree with what CBO Ponowitz has said. I think it's really imperative that we also do set some density, hard density targets in the next official plan for Perth County.
Further questions or comments at this point? Councillor Rothwell?
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Ed, for your reports. Obviously, there's a number of other subdivisions that are out there as well that on Tremaine Ave South on the east side, there's a plan subdivision which has been approved some long time ago, and it has over 200 lots available in it. There's the most recently approved phase 1 and 2 for Nickel Properties on the west side of Highway 23, which is very substantial in size as well. And then there's some additional land areas that have yet to be built out in some of our other subdivisions. And then we do have a few lots available down in Atwood through the one plan subdivision on the south side, and then most recently the 270 or so lots that are up in the northeast corner. But again, council has to know, and not to answer all the points, but just given my history in terms of planning, is that these plans of subdivision do take time to develop, and some are ready now, and then some will take time, and they will be perhaps 2 to 3 years in getting ready in terms of servicing and so on. So I think staff are certainly aware of those things, and I think we encourage them to inform us in terms of what sort of densities, and we can look what the Affordable Housing Task Group has brought forward, and certainly what this council has been doing recently in terms of encouraging and supporting higher densities within our planned subdivision is crucial for all of us in terms of A, affordability, and B, preservation of agricultural land outside of our urban boundaries.
Thank you. Further questions or comments, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, through Mayor Kasenberg, just a question I've been asked a few times. What about the service lots that are available on Binning Street heading towards the Steve Kerr, the north and south? We can't comment on that?
I maybe refer to somebody that may know what stage those are at. I'm not sure. I think they have been draft plan approved, and I think that's where they sit right now. So it's up to the developer to proceed with that.
Looks like Mr. Snell wants to weigh in.
Yeah, the first block on, excuse me, the first block on bidding has been draft approved, and I understand there's been some movement with the developer, but until that's finally registered by the developer, it's at their pace.
Great, thank you. Further questions, comments? All right, I have a resolution for our consideration that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth receive the 2019 Building Department a year in review report as presented. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Duncan, and seconded by Councillor Behrens. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Any discussion or debate at this time? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Next up is item 5.3. I'll call on Interim Manager of Recreation Amy Gangle to present a proposal for the adjustment of the Parks and Recreation rates and fees for 2020-2021. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of Council, before you use the 2020-2021 recreation rates and fee schedule, annually the North Perth Recreation Advisory Committee, along with Park staff, review and make recommendations for adjustments of the rates for Council's consideration. In order to maintain comparable rates and fees with neighboring facilities and programs, it's recommended that most of our rates be adjusted by a marginal increase of 2%. We have made one change to our daycare fee. We have a flat rate fee now instead of having a daily fee with extended care, half-day rates, those elements. To be consistent with the daycare fee schedule and improve service efficiencies for program registration, it's recommended that we move to a flat rate fee. We've consulted with the City of Stratford, and our confirmed proposed fees do fall within their market value for our day camp programs. These increase in user fees do support the budget survey results, which did indicate almost 40% of respondents would support an increase in user fees to deal with increased costs and a balanced budget, while 25% would support a combination of increased property taxes and user fees.
Councillors, any questions or comments on the proposed matter before us? Seeing no indication of same, I have two aspects of business related to this. First, a resolution for consideration that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth approves the 2020 to 2021 Parks and Recreation rates and fees as presented. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Andreessen, seconded by Councillor Richardson. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that's carried. And secondly, I have a bylaw, that bylaw number 17-2019, being a bylaw to amend the North Perth Rates and Fees bylaw, Schedule H, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, oh, it's not right. We're going to try this again. I just found a typo. Indeed. Let's get the right year here. We'll try again. That bylaw number 17-2020, being a bylaw to amend the North Perth Rates and Fees bylaw, Schedule H, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Richardson, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Rothwell. Any discussion or debate on the bylaw? Councillor Rothwell.
Just one question, if I may, for Amy, through you, Mr. Mayor. Can you confirm the date that these new rates are effective? I know in the bylaw it says for the pool and program rates, they are effective May 1st, but is that for all of the rates, or is it only effective to those specific rates?
Yes, all our rates are effective May 1st.
Thank you.
Any further questions, comments, debate? Councillor Andreessen.
Again, through you, Mayor Kiesenberg, just to Amy. I just have a question around if anybody has had a contract, so to speak, on a rental. So if they had a rental for August the 20th, but they booked it now, how does that fee affect them because of the changes?
If anybody who has booked prior to this approval, we honor that price.
Okay.
What we quoted them at that point.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, Council, any further questions or comments? Debate? Let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Thank you. We now turn to item 5.4, and in particular item 5.4.1. I note the exit from the chamber of those councillors who have declared potential pecuniary interest in this matter. Are there any questions about our report on accounts at this time? All right, seeing none, I have a resolution for our consideration that the following summary of accounts be received by council for information. The total is $1,240,587.37. Can I invite a mover for this? Councillor Richardson, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Seiler. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Anstad.
Thanks, Mayor Kiesenberg. Through you, Fran, I just noticed the police, the charge is $608.68. That just seems low to me. Is that?
I can provide you with some details.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions, discussion, or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And And that is carried. Thank you. For item 5.4.2, Council is invited to consider bylaw number 10-2020 pertaining to authorizing the maintenance and repair of the Crowder Drain. Any needful comments on this, Treasurer Hale? Just there for questions. All right, Council, do you have any questions about this matter? Seeing no indication of questions, let me read into the record the proposed bylaw resolution that bylaw number 10-2020 being a bylaw to authorize the maintenance and repair of the Crowder Municipal Drain be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Duncan, and seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Thank you. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. For item 5.4.3, Council is invited to consider bylaw number 16-2020, which provides for an interim tax levy. Would you like to address this one, Ms. Hale? Not particularly. She's there for
Only if
questions.
council has questions.
She's there for questions. All right. Council, any questions about this proposed matter? All right. Seeing none, let me read into the record a resolution for our consideration that bylaw number 16-2020, being a bylaw to provide for an interim tax levy, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that one? Councillor Andreessen, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Seiler. Popular stuff, that one. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing no indication of same, let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Now that brings us to item 5.4.4, in which Council is invited to consider bylaw number 15-2020, which would grant a further deferral on development charge payment by Terra Park Developments Limited and spread those payments fully due at a revised due date across a period from that date. Treasurer Hale, perhaps this one you'd like to say a few words about.
Yes. Typically, council has provided Ed Poddenitz and myself with delegated authority to enter into agreements with those developers who are requesting deferrals on their development charges. We did have an agreement with this particular developer for the 6 months, and we have received another request for an extension. And they actually, the developer proposed that it be done in installments, and we concurred, and therefore have bringing that to council this evening to have those development charges paid in installments over the next 6 months, if council so desires.
Okay, councillors, questions for Ms. Hale about this one? Okay, seeing no indication of that, I have a bylaw resolution for our consideration that bylaw number 15-2020, being a bylaw to defer the collection of development charges, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Seiler, thank you, seconded by Councillor Behrens. Any discussion or debate? Seeing no indication of same, let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We have no reports indicated tonight from our Manager of Environmental Services. That brings us to item 5.6, Manager of Operations reports. Let's turn to item 5.6.1. Council is asked to appoint an engineer to evaluate potential improvements to the Turnbull Municipal Drain. And I see that Scott Richardson, our drainage guy, is here to address this matter for us. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Like on December 9th there to 2019, the Council of Municipality of North Perth passed resolution number 686.12/19 that Council of the Municipality of North Perth, in accordance with Section 70 of the Drainage Act, proceed with the request for improvement of the Turnbull Municipal Drain. The recommendation.
All right, Council, we have a recommendation here for our consideration, a resolution that reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, in accordance with Section 78 of the Drainage Act, appoints Dietrich Engineering to investigate the possible improvements to the Turnbull Municipal Drain. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Rothwell and Councillor Johnston, thank you. Any discussion or debate on this resolution? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Next is item 5.6.2, in which Council is asked to consider authorizing improvements to the Galbraith Municipal Drain. Scott, you're up again.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider Section 78 under the Drainage Act on the Galbraith Municipal Drain in the Elma Ward. The drain begins on Lot 11, Concession 5, and outlets into the Johnson Drain on Lot 8, Concession 5. The last report was prepared by Gamsby and Manorow Limited in May of 1975. The report was adopted on January the 5th, 1976, under Bylaw 75-33. The request for improvement of the outlet of the Galbraith Municipal Drain, as per Section 78 of the Drainage Act, was received on January the 2nd, 2020, and is for the enclosure of a portion of open ditch on Lot 9, Concession 5. The enclosure is requested for the purpose of enhanced farm practice. The majority of the works will be at the expense of the landowner that filed the request. There will be no works required in the municipal road allowance at this time.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions from councillors about this matter? Councillor Rothwell.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Scott, is there a Department of Fisheries and Oceans requirement for review on this for enclosing of the drain or not?
Once we appoint the engineer, so after we accept this, or hopefully accept this tonight, we give this to Maitland Valley first, the MVCA. They get a month to comment on that. Usually you don't have any problems at that end. After that, we'd appoint the engineer, which in turn the DFO would then get involved, and as the process carries on.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? All right, I have a resolution for our consideration that reads as follows: that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, in accordance with Section 78 of the Drainage Act, proceed with the request for improvement of the Galbraith Municipal Drain. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Johnston, thank you, and Councillor Seiler. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried as well. Thank you. Next up is item 5.6.3. Don't budge. Council is asked to award the tender for the improvement of Branch B Municipal Drain to Markhart Farm Drainage Limited. Comments, Scott?
Tenders for the work on Drain 59 Branch B were received on Monday, January the 13th, 2020 at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The following tenders were received with the HST included. Obviously, the low bid was Marquette Farm Drainage at $91,101.73. Robinson was right there at $95,462.40. AG Hayter Contracting Limited at $106,270.85. And Hammond Plumbing Services is a little high, 410, 620, 53. The estimate construction cost by Street Engineering and Associates for this work was 99,214 with the HST. So it came under.
Thank you, councillors. Questions on this matter? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor Kasenberg. Through you, just wondering, like, just when you looked at the tenders like that from that one came in like 4 times, like being a little bit in and out, did they read the tender wrong, or did they, just out of curiosity, like that seems like a complete typo.
Yeah, they never called looking for information. Just, I guess you run into stuff like this sometimes. That's a little ridiculous for sure. I agree, but
where are they out of? You know,
I have no idea.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine. So.
Okay. Okay, councillors, school it. All right. Further questions or comments? All right. Seeing none, I have a resolution for our consideration that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth award the tender for the work on Drain 59 Branch B Municipal Drain as per the recommendation from Street Engineering and Associates to Markart Farm Drainage Limited in the amount of $91,101.73, HST included. Can I invite a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Kellum, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Rothwell. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Scott. We have no report this meeting from our fire chief. That brings us to item 6 on our agenda. For item 6.1, councillors, I think there were a number of items that we identified earlier. Requests for report from staff. I did make some notes. I assume that the CAO did too. He's raising his hand. So CAO Snow, if you would like to weigh in on this.
So based on the notes I jotted down, was that the staff prepare reports on producer responsibility for the recycling, slow down, move over for waste collection staff, a report on Lake Erie source protection region regarding over-application of winter maintenance chemicals, and a report on Calvary Zahn's letter regarding tree planting to combat greenhouse gas emissions.
Thank you. That's the notes that I took as well. Councillors, any further reports that you'd like to request of staff at this time? I think for the sake of the staff, shall we batch these and have a resolution to request the 4 reports? Councillor Andreessen, let's have you in on this one.
I have another report request. Is that okay to add right now? Just given the presentation we had from TGT Solutions, I just wondered, Mayor Kasenberg, if there's going to be more discussion about the information that was received, or are we just going to be acting on that strategic plan? I'm just curious about what potentially could be the next steps.
So I'll invite Treasurer Hale to come to the microphone and offer some comments on behalf of staff and the process.
Yes, it's our intention to bring back a report with a plan for council consideration. And we have some pent-up excitement with regard to this governance model, and therefore looking forward to move forward with that sooner than later. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So something of a resolution then that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth requests the following 5 reports now. I believe we might as well batch them if that's all right with Council. As per the stipulations of the CAO, and adding Councillor Andreessen's request for report on next steps on the IT strategic plan. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Rothwell, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Let me change our sources here. Any discussion or debate on these requests? this resolution? Seeing none, let's have a vote. I assume that you have something there, Jeanette, for us. Thank you. And that is carried. Thank you. We don't have any further report requests from council at this point. I'm going to invite the Deputy Mayor to take the chair at this point in order that I may transact or participate in the debate for the next matter.
Okay, moving on to 6.2. Mayor Kiesenberg.
Thank you. So you have noted before, I think, the holidays that I introduced a resolution related to striking a new committee in the municipality related to agriculture and agri-technology. I think I want to make sort of a few prepared points tonight. First of all, the obvious, and I'm good at being Captain Obvious, is agriculture is our heart in North Perth. It is the primary economic activity of our community, and we as a council are interested in the economic and community development of North Perth. Recently, I held a consultative meeting with those interested in agriculture and agri-technology to ascertain the state of this important part of our fabric. I was impressed with the attendance at the meeting, the passion of those attending, the relative interest in agendas to move our agricultural sector forward. I have been passionate about notions of this community being an agri-technology hub, a place for invention, for patents, for experimentation, and I think we have a living lab all around us. And those who attended that consultation set out some matters that should be considered as potential priorities to strengthen and diversify our agricultural economic interests. We learned about concerns that a greater emphasis on agricultural and agri-technological education is needed. We learned about labor force concerns. We learned about technological infrastructure deficits. We learned about the need to preserve farmland. We learned about carbon footprint reduction initiatives. We learned about continuity in farming. There are a range of needs and issues, and many of those attending wanted to get to them. I acknowledge quite comfortably that some of the ideas and interests of those at that roundtable may not seem like a natural fit for municipality action, but many of them are, and we want to drive agricultural success and innovation. It takes partnerships to do so. It may take municipal advocacy to make some things happen as well. We may be able to grease the wheels of some of the more innovative ideas, like bringing an incubator or hub for agriculture to North Perth, addressing rural broadband access, or getting into the biogas game in a more significant way. I believe that council needs to have great advisors. I believe that important conversations need to happen. I know that some of that happens out of our earshot, but in this way, we can build a common place for agriculture and agri-technology and even agritourism to have expression and the ear of this council. It is for that reason that I have proposed the establishment of this new committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Kiesenberg. Council members, any comments or questions for Todd? Councillor Andreessen.
I just wondered, I just want to thank Mayor Kiesenberg for his vision in terms of keeping this top of mind and having this type of advisory group support council in our work. I think it's amazing. And it also speaks to our council's focus and support of agriculture, which I think, again, is amazing. I have a couple questions. My first question is just around clarity. Would this type of committee be like an ongoing standing committee that would happen just like we have a library board committee and such? And if that's the case, I was just wondering, in most of our standing committees, we have 2 representatives from council, and I wondered if that might be something for consideration for this committee.
So in response, at least from my vantage point, I think this is a standing committee. It is a committee that we don't put a defined work date on, because I think the work will be ongoing. Economic development in our community is an ongoing activity, and agricultural economic development is got to be a key player, a key role. So I believe it is a sustainable opportunity. With regards to additional councillors, I'm certainly open to that as an amendment to the terms of reference, if that is council's wish.
Councillor Seiler?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Kelly. My question is receiving compensation for the service. What do you mean by that?
So this will be set up as just as any other committee that this council has direct representation on, that councillors will be paid the usual committee rates for their participation in this committee, as they would on any other board or committee that we have established that is of standing nature.
So it'd be just what we set up at the first year, like.
Yeah, it would be it would be like the cemetery board, like the BIA, like the drainage committee, and so forth. It would have the similar terms for councillors. Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Barons?
That statement is a little bit confusing because councillors do not get paid for boards and committees that are standing. The Recreation Advisory Board, the Library Board, all of those things, councillors do not get paid for. So that should be removed.
Fair. It is in the same category of committee service as any other committee of council. With, I think there's a few exceptions of external boards where there are payments, but this is not an external board. So thank you for that recommendation.
Councillor Duncan?
I just maybe want to make a point of procedure. We don't normally debate notice of motions at the time that they're, or discuss them at the time that they're tabled, do we?
This was tabled in December.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Matt.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. I like the idea of this committee because I think it could be very important and it could be very multifaceted, and I do believe could bring a fair bit to the community. So I am obviously in support of it. Just in further to the compensation portion, possibly just maybe making reference to our procedural bylaw, which, like any committees that are over and above appointed committees, like all of our councillors were all appointed certain committees and stuff that we've been sitting on, whether it be the task force or library board or anything, those are all included in our standard stipend, of which if there's any committees that are standing over and above that, you would be compensated in accordance with our procedural bylaw. That would do that, just the wording for that, but I do believe that would be,
yeah, that's a friendly.
But I think the committee itself would be, certainly there could be some significant benefit to that.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Where are you, Dave? There you go. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I just want to say I was at the inaugural meeting of the larger group, and the ideas that were tossed around that day and the discussion point that day was awesome. And I think the amount of enthusiasm for a committee like this, I think in our municipality is great right now, and for that reason, I am 150% behind this.
Councillor Johnson? Any further discussion towards this? Councillor Seiler?
Thank you, Mayor Kelly. I agree with this. Now, our rules are that the mayor and deputy mayor can sit at any committee level, any meetings.
I think it's just the mayor that can serve ex officio. Yeah.
So would we go with one councillor here?
Well, that is up for discussion. That's one of the amendments that we have tabled right now. So I guess we'll deal with that. So the two amendments that I had down here was the number of councillors. So we have the mayor for sure. What would we like to go with here? 2? Is it okay by motion?
Sure. Yeah.
So, oh, she's gone. Okay. So please note, one of the amendments are that there's going to be the mayor and 2 councillors. And then the second amendment would be that there is no compensation for this committee?
Beyond usual.
Usual.
Yeah.
And you have that as well?
I think when you say beyond usual, I've heard 2 different conversations about whether this is a committee that you're appointed to normally, and we usually review them November or December, or is this a new ad hoc type committee?
Yeah.
So it's a standing committee,
Yeah.
similar, and you had thrown out library or recreation advisory. So in that case, there is no compensation for it. So we don't need to refer to the procedural bylaw or anything else. This is one of those committees, and everybody's familiar and understands it, that you sit on as part of your role of being on North Perth Council. Is that the correct understanding?
That's what I intend. Thank you, Councillor Behrens. Yes. So if there's, I think there is a clause in the motion, is there not, that speaks to compensation?
Yes.
So we should strike that. Is it in the terms? It's in the terms of reference.
Correct.
Sure. Yeah, I think it would be a friendly change for the sake of clarity to remove section 6.2 of the terms of reference to the committee. 6.1, I think, allows for the possibility that there could be reasonable expenses incurred, and I think you should probably leave that in place to facilitate volunteer participation.
So to be clear to the deputy clerk, so the 2 we've changed are the number of people on the committee and removing 6.2. Any other further discussion? Councillor Seiler.
Yeah.
Just some clarification on how we adopt the committee with other people. Do we advertise it, or do they fill out their forms and saying they will sit on this committee?
I believe that after, yes, but I believe after this motion, if approved, then we will do the next or appoint the council members. Or
we can certainly take that motion, or we can wait for the clerk to advise us about the appropriate process for total recruitment for this, which could include the appointment of councillors.
So we'll wait until.
Right.
Perfect. Okay, we will wait then. Wait, okay.
I've got the big list. Yeah.
That is fine. Thanks, Councillor Seiler. Any other comments or questions before I read the resolution? Seeing none, Council, I do have a resolution that the Council of the Municipality of North Perth establish a standing agricultural and agricultural technology advisory committee without time limit on its operations. And further that this agricultural and agri-technology advisory committee be constituted and mandated in accordance with draft terms of reference attached as Appendix A as amended. And further that this committee will be afforded clerking services, logistics, meeting and recording, secretarial support by the municipality of North Perth. And further that any councillor appointed to this
so we might take that line out.
We're going to take that line out.
Yeah.
So that line, disregard. And further that this committee will report at least annually and at its discretion more frequently in supporting the work of council in promoting and supporting the evolution of the agricultural and agricultural technology sectors in North Perth. Do I have a mover? Mayor Todd, second by Councillor Johnson. Can we have the vote, please?
I think Danette's catching up. I'm going to have to reach over your shoulder here, Doug. Try not to breathe on you.
Yeah, no worries. And that is carried. Thanks. Moving on in our agenda, we're moving on to 7.1. And please note that Mayor Kasenberg has left the room. So for item 7, we have received one item of correspondence that staff has advised warrants for further action, where we have a request from the Atwood Lions seeking council support to conduct a gaming event on Saturday, March 21st at the Listowel Memorial Arena as part of Listowel Patty Fest. Staff has prepared a draft resolution to this effect, which reads as follows. That the Council of the Municipality of North Perth support the request from the Lions Club of Atwood to conduct a social gaming event on Saturday, March 21st, 2020 at the Listowel Memorial Arena as part of Patty Fest. Moved by Councillor Rothwell, second by Councillor Anstett. May we have the vote? And that is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Doug. You're welcome.
That brings us to item 8 on our agenda, which allows council to consider and enact bylaws. Turning to item 8.1, council is asked to amend existing bylaw number 38-2018 by way of an amending bylaw number 9-2020 to provide for the costs of construction of the nickel drain and to provide a revised apportionment schedule. Ms. Bearfeld, any comments before we act on this one?
Actual bylaw. The former bylaw was based on the estimate, and tonight is the actual costs.
Okay. Any questions of staff about this matter, councillors? All right, I'll read into the record the proposed bylaw here, that bylaw number 9-2020, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 79-2018, nickel municipal drain, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Andreessen, and seconded by Councillor Richardson. Thank you. Any further discussion or debate? Let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Next up is item 8.2. Council is invited to formulate an agreement with the Perth County Information Network that has us hosting a staff position of PCIN courier. It looks like Mr. Snell would like to make some comments about this one. Chris, go ahead.
So as council may recall, library CEO did present a report earlier last fall on the agreement with PCIN for us to host the delivery service for PCIN, and actually it creates a more cost-effective way for us to deliver materials within our own 3 library locations, and therefore this agreement has both advantages to us and PCIN, and it is based on the similar agreement we have with other shared services.
Questions or comments for Mr. Snell or staff on this matter? All right, I have a bylaw resolution for us to consider, that bylaw number 11-2020, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement with Perth County Information Network, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Duncan, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Andreessen. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. Next up is item 8.3. Council is invited to formulate an agreement with Mornington Communications for the placement of equipment in a municipal facility. Mr. Snell, you have some comments on this one?
So this is rental space that the library actually rents to Mornington Communications in the basement of the library for their housing of technology to provide services throughout our community. Previously, the rental was $800, but it's been $800 since 2011, and we do see it fit that we're looking for an increase over that period of time and have put the new cost up to $1,200 per year.
Thank you, councillors. Any questions for Mr. Snell or staff about this one? Okay, seeing none, let me read into the record the proposed bylaw, that bylaw number 12-2020, being a bylaw to authorize the signing of an agreement with Mornington Communications Cooperative Limited, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Deputy Mayor Kellum, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Rothwell. Any further discussion or debate? Councillor Rothwell.
Just one quick item. If through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chris, can you please look at page 202? There's just an issue regarding our insurance coverage. The printed says 2 million and the number says 5 million, so it's going to be one or the other. So, okay, thank you.
We're advised that it's supposed to be 5. All right. Any further discussion, questions, or comments? I believe it's been duly moved and seconded. Let's have that vote. And that is carried. Thank you. And finally, we have item 8.4, a third reading of a bylaw to amend the North Perth zoning bylaw to provide a zoning change for property acquired by Stop 23 Auto Sales adjacent to its current holdings. And I see that the clerk has approached the podium. Ms. Bearfelds.
Just for clarification, on October 28th, the Perth County Councillors, along with North Perth Council, entertained a public meeting dealing with the official plan amendment as well as the zoning bylaw amendment for Stop 23. The actual decision was made by Perth County Council on December 19th, 2019. At the time of the public meetings, North Perth Council gave it first and second reading, deferred the third reading until such time the official plan was adopted. That was done, as I said, December 19th, 2019. We're feeling it's appropriate tonight now to move forward with the third reading.
Questions or comments for staff at this time, councillors? Seeing none, I will read into the record the bylaw resolution that bylaw number 114-2019, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw 6-ZB-1999 as amended, be introduced, read, and considered read a third time, and be finally passed, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed with the seal of the corporation. Can I invite a mover for that? Councillor Andreessen, and seconded by Councillor Duncan. Thank you. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. We are now at agenda item 9. Are there any notices of motion from councillors attending this evening? Councillors, I'm going to take an opportunity here, because we're talking about notices of motion, to advise you on something that has happened at County Council, initiated by this County Councillor. Further to comments made at our last council meeting, I have served a notice of motion at the Council of the County of Perth to introduce a Shared Opportunities Standing Committee of Council with the purpose of exploring approaches to greater collaboration amongst all parties in the county, lower and upper tier municipalities, relating to gaining efficiencies in the deliverance of local government solutions. And I do expect that this notice of motion will be considered at the next meeting of County Council on February 6, 2020. That brings us to agenda item 10. For item 10.1, are there any announcements that would be of benefit to our community or that reflect well on North Perth at this time? Councillor Duncan.
Have something, I maybe should have brought it up under item 6. Land Division Committee today, this council had asked me to report back on some stuff, the activities at Land Division. So at a recent meeting, we deferred an application at North Perth Council here for a severance by the Lutenaggers. They brought their application to Land Division today. It was approved at Land Division. They did shrink it down from 2.9 to, I think it'll come back at roughly 2.2. And Land Division approved that today, just so there's no surprises when the zoning bylaw comes back to North Perth Council.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. Any further announcements that would be of benefit to our community or that reflect well? CAO Snell, you're number 13.
Just sort of building on Councillor Duncan's information, Council had requested the first meeting in January information on land severances. Staff have provided a couple of reports that were actually county reports. Is that sufficient to fulfill that request by Council? Or does Council want North Perth planning staff to do an additional report?
Councillors, what say you? I know it came out recently, or at least the last one came out recently, so perhaps a little more digestion time is needed, but we'll bear that in advisement, I think, under advisement. Thanks for raising that, Chris. Anything else, announcements that would be of benefit to the community at this time? Okay, that brings us to agenda item 11. I'm going to switch the source here. We have 4 matters before us to be considered in a closed session meeting of council. I will now read the resolution that both explains and enables our action to enter into closed session. That this committee proceed in camera at 9:10 p.m. To address matters pertaining to 1, a proposed or pending acquisition, sale of land for municipal or local board purpose regarding A, the Listowel to Gowanstown Trail connection, and B, property described as Park Lots 3, 5, A and B, Plan 290, North Perth. 2, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board regarding the CAS or CAZ agreements. And 3, the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose regarding the Line 81 Bridge project. Can I invite a mover for this? Councillor Rothwell, thank you, and seconded by Councillor Behrens. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, let's have that vote. And that is carried. At this time, I believe council is going to move to the next room for the purposes of this closed session meeting. I'm going to silence all of the microphones. Thank you, Council, for participation in the closed session meeting. That brings us to agenda item 12. At this time, we have nothing to report from our closed session. Council, as a mandated good practice, acts near the end of its meeting agenda to confirm all of its actions and business of its meeting through what is called the confirmatory bylaw. I have the draft of the confirmatory bylaw number 18-2020, which reads as follows. That bylaw number 18-2020 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions. I should be leaving too. You are right. We all need to leave. Matt, Duncan, you're on the chair. Take over. Read this and get her done.
We have confirmatory bylaw number 18-2020 being a bylaw to confirm generally previous actions of the Council of the Municipality of North Perth, be introduced, read, and considered read a first, second, and third time, be finally passed, and that said bylaw be signed by the Mayor and the Clerk, sealed with the seal of the Corporation. Moved by Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Rothwell. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Thanks to Councillor Duncan for the rescue. All right. Councillors, we've completed the deliberation and taken action on the business that has come before us tonight. Before I read a motion to adjourn, is there any further business? Seeing no indication of same, I have a motion to adjourn which reads as follows, that the council meeting adjourns at 10:26 p.m. to meet again for the 2020 budget discussions on Wednesday, January 29th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Can I invite a mover? Moved by Councillor Anstett, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? And that is carried. This meeting is adjourned.